I saw somewhere that this was a banned book. Could someone tell me why it's a banned book? It was in the latest box of books that I got. If you watch the Sunday videos, you can watch the Sunday videos for more information. But it's a classic, and I should have included it in my historicals the other day, and I didn't, and I'm sorry I didn't do it. I just did my top 10, and this, if I had thought about it, this one, and this would have definitely. Oh wait, let's look. This is the D. Louise book series. I'm Christina, Kristina. This is where I read books, talk about books, no special effects, no theme music, none of that fancy smancy stuff going on here. So let's see. The way of life it describes is no more, but the book still lives on, as it always will. The epic chronicle of man's struggle against injustice and humanity. With the passage of years, the story it tells of the Jodes and their journey to the Golden Land is not so much just the story of one family and one time, but the story of courage and passion of all men throughout history. So what do you think? The print. It's like a font too. Let's see. To the red country and part of gray country of Oklahoma. The last rains came gently, and they did not cut the scarred earth. The plows crossed and recrossed the rivulet marks. The last rains lifted the corn quickly and scattered the weed colonies and grass along the sides of the road, so that the gray country and the dark red country began to disappear in a green cover. In the last part of May, the sky grew pale, and the clouds that hung in high puffs for so long in the spring were dissipated. Page 1, Chapter 2. A huge red transport truck stood in front of the little roadside restaurant. The vertical exhaust pipes muttered softly, and almost invisible haze of steel blue smoke hovered over its end. It was a new truck, shining red, and in 12-inch letters on its side, Oklahoma City Transport Company. Its double tires were new, and a brass padlock stood straight out from the hasp on the big block doors. Inside the screen restaurant, a radio played. Quiet dance music turned low the way it is when no one is listening. A small and outlet fan turned silently in the circular hole over the entrance, and flies buzzed excitedly about the doors and windows, butting the screens. Inside, one man, the truck driver, sat on a stool and rested his elbows on the counter and looked over his coffee at the lean and lonely waitress. He talked the smart, listless language of the roadsides to her. I've seen him about 3 months ago. He had an operation, cut some pin out, I forget what, and she doesn't seem to longer than a week. I seen him myself. Looked fine then. He's a sort of guy when he ain't stinko. Now and then flies roared softly at the screen door. The coffee machine spurted steam, and the waitress, without looking, reached behind her and shut it off. Wow, that's a long chapter. Chapter 5. The owners of the land came into land or more often, a spokesman for the owners came. They came in closed cars and they felt the dry earth with their fingers, and sometimes they drove big earth augers into the ground for soil tests. The tenants from their sun-beaten dooryards watched uneasily when the closed cars drove along the fields, and at last the owner men drove into the dooryards and sat in their cars to talk out of the windows. The tenant man stood beside the car for a while, then squatted on their hams and found sticks with which to mark the dust. In the open doors the women stood looking out, and behind them the children, corn-headed children, with wide eyes, one bare foot on top of the other bare foot, and the toes working. The women and the children watched their men talking to the owner. They were silent. Some of the owner men were kind because they hated what they had to do, and some of them were angry because they hated to be cruel, and some of them were cold because they had long ago found that one could not be an owner unless one were cold. And all of them were caught in something larger than themselves. Some of them hated the mathematics that drove them, and some were afraid, and some worshipped the mathematics because it provided a refuge from the thought and from feeling. If a bank or a finance company owned the land, the owner said the big bank or the company needs, wants, insists, must have, as though the bank or the company were a monster with thought and feeling, which had ensnared them. These last would take no responsibility for the banks or the companies because they were men and slaves, while the banks were machines and masters all at the same time, some of their owner men a little proud to be slaves, too cold and powerful masters. The owner sat in the cars and explained, "You know the land is poor. You've scabbled at it long enough, God knows." The squatting tenant nodded and wondered and drew fingers in the dust, and yes, they knew, God knows. If the dust only couldn't fly, if the top would only stay on the soil, it might not be so bad. The owner went on leading to their point. You know the land's getting poorer. You know what cotton does to land, robs it, sucks it all the blood out of it. The squatters nodded. They knew, God knew, if they could only rotate the crops, they might pump blood back into the land. Well, it's too late, and the owner men explained the working and the things of the monster that was stronger than they were. A man can hold land if he can just eat and pay taxes. He can do that. Yes, he can do that until his crops fail one day and he has to borrow money from the bank. But you see, a bank or company can't do that because those creatures don't breathe air, don't eat side meat. They eat the interest on money. If they don't get it, they die the way you die, without air, without side meat. It's a sad thing, but it is so. It is just so. Oh, that's sad and depressing. Chapter 6. The Reverend Casey and young Tom stood on the hill and looked down on the low place. The small unpainted house was mashed at one corner, and it had been pushed off its foundation so that it slumped at an angle, its blind front windows pointing at a spot of sky well above the horizon. The fences were gone, and the cotton grew in the dooryard up against the house, and the cotton was about the shed barn. The outhouse lay on its side, and the cotton grew close against it. Where the dooryard had been pounded by bare feet of children, by stamping horses' hoofs, and by the brood wagon wheels, it cultivated now, and the dark green dusty cotton grew. Young Tom stared for a long time at the ragged willow beside the dry horse trough, at the concrete base where the pump had been. Jesus! Hell, must have stopped, pooped here. There ain't nobody living there. At least he moved quickly down the hill, and Casey followed him. He looked into the barn shed deserted, a little ground straw on the floor and the mule stall in the corner. As he looked in there, skittering on the floor, and a family of mice fouled under the straw. Jode paused at the entrance to the tool shed lintel. No tools were there. A broken plow point, a mess of hay in the corner, an iron wheel from a hay rake, and a rat-gnawed mule collar, a flat gallon oil can on a crusted with dirt and oil. a pair of torn overalls hanging by a nail. "There ain't nothing left," said Jode. "He had pretty nice tools. There ain't nothing left." Casey said, "If I was still a preacher, I'd say the arm of the Lord had struck. But now I don't know what happened. I'd been away. I didn't hear nothing." They walked towards the concrete well capped through cotton plants to get to it, and the bolls were forming on the cotton and the land was cultivated. "We never planted here," Jode said. "We always kept this clear. Why, you can't get a horse in now without tromping the cotton." They paused at the dry watering trough, and the proper weeds that should grow under a trough were gone, and the old thick wood of the trough were dry and cracked. On the well cap the bolts that had been held the pump stuck up, the threads rusty and the nuts gone. Jode looked into the tube well and listened. He dropped a clod down the well and listened. "She's a good well. I can't hear water." He seemed reluctant to let go to the house. He dropped clod after clod down the well. "Maybe they're all dead, but somebody told me I'd get word some way. Maybe they left a letter or something to tell in the house. Would they have knowed you were coming? I don't know. No, I guess not. I don't know till a week ago." "Let's look in the house. She's all pushed out a shape. Something knocked the hell out of her." They walked slowly toward the sagging house. Two of the supports of the porch roof were pushed out so that the roof flopped down on one end. Joe stopped at the step, 12 by 12 timber. "Doorstep here, but they're gone. Ma's dead. If Ma has anywheres, that gate be shut and hooked. That's one thing she always done, seen that gate was shut." His eyes were warm. Ever since the pig got in over to Jacobs, Millie Jacobs was just out in the barn. She come in while the pig was still eating it. Well, Millie Jacobs was in the family way and she went raving. Never did get over it. Touched ever since, but Ma took a lesson from it. She never left that pig gate open lest she was in the house herself. Never did forget. No, they're gone or dead. He climbed to the split porch and looked into the kitchen window. The windows were broken out and throwing rocks on the floor, and the walls sagged deeply. "Kids, they'll go 20 miles to bust a window. I done it myself. They don't know when a house is empty. They know. That's the first thing kids do when folks move out." So what happened to his family? What happened? Do you know? You'll have to read the book to find out. This is so old. Let's see what it says. 1966. Original first printing 1939. Same year as Gone with the Wind. Check it out. Have a good day.